don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?
Peace and Black Power, family. Welcome to another exciting installment of HAPI Talks. Tonight we have a very extraordinary panel, and the discussion is the blueprint for Black Power. And one of the important things about this panel, we have heavy hitters, Professor Tony Browder, Dr. Runoko Rashidi, Professor Hunter Adams. These three brothers are going to really get into the blueprint for Black Power from a very, very organic, holistic way. Before we get into that, just do me a favor, please. Just everyone, please like this video, share it. We have a couple of announcements we're going to make before we bring the three legends, historians, esteemed elders into the discussion. If you can, please, again, like and share the video. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. Please, everyone, share it. We got to break these algorithms. We talk about this often, of just how important these discussions are and how limited people are from seeing them. The way we do that, we got to keep sharing it, keep liking it, keep sharing it. So please do that before we get started. And we'll be talking about that throughout. Quick announcement, HAPI. All right, so the film, we have a screening this Saturday, 7 p.m. Please go to www.hapifilm.com, HAPIFILM, and get your tickets. The importance of that is to understand this whole HAPI movement and what we're doing. You have to see the film. We understand a lot of people were with us, with the program and the HAPI Talks, and they watched the interviews and all that, but it's very important to see that aspect of this. If you have not seen it, please, this Saturday, go get your tickets. Following this Saturday, after the screening, as always, we have our panel discussion on the film with, select key cast members. And this is very important because this is only for, for ticket holders only, and not for everyone who just watched the film. But if you don't want to wait till Saturday and you want to watch it tonight, you can go to the website and get a DVD or a digital copy. Extremely important. This whole thing, HAPI, especially HAPI Talks, didn't start out. We started out really just with this, promoting the film. But this has turned into something beyond our wildest imagination to let you know that there's powers beyond, what we're thinking about doing. The ancestors are here, and we are being guided to do this. This is not something that we said, you know what, we're going to start this podcast, we're going to keep it going, and so forth and so on. It originally started with just talking about the film. So the film is a very important aspect of that. Anyway, got to get out in these numbers. We got to support the elders. We got to really, really bring back what we need to do. And that's what we're here in this HAPI mission. So without any further ado, we're going to bring in our illustrious panel, and we're going to introduce everyone. How you doing, brother? Hotep, peace.
I'm good. I'm good.
How are you? Dr. Rashidi, how are you doing?
I'm good, brother.
So, one thing I didn't mention to the audience before we started is this. I like to do this in a segment of Blueprint for Black Power segment. And this one is more so, I like to call this the cultural piece in terms of using the pyramid analysis of HAPI or Dr. Leonard Jeffries. And we understand that part. The culture, the mind, the cultural imperative is the first one we're going to start. Next one, we're going to do politics, and then we'll do also economics. So with that, the cultural piece, Professor Adams, I want to start with you because we talk often about the mind, how it works. And it seems like a lot of what goes on in this world deals with just how human beings see themselves. So in your field of study in neuroscience, how important is this in terms of our current state?
It's extremely important, and thank you for having me, and greetings to my dear brothers Tony and brother Runoko. What's up, brother Runoko?
I'm good, my brother. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to be seen in 2021 by someone else's calendar, but we won't talk about that right now, later on. But the thing that I want to suggest to you and to the viewers is that we have to consider the most profound level of intellectual warfare in which we've engaged in. Now, we know that coming up tomorrow, there's going to be the screening of Judas and the Black Messiah, right, about the assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton and Mark Clark of the Chicago Black Panther Party. And so for those of you who watched the film, pay close attention to the overall context within which the film is being shot and within which what was happening around the country and the world at that time. And I'm willing to bet that they will not talk about, they'll mention COINTELPRO for sure, but they will not talk about, more than likely, I'll be surprised if they do, about the Black Studies movement that was taking place across the country, right? That Black men and women, youth, were pushing for the universities, their schools, to adopt Black studies, right? The study of African people in this country, on the continent, and elsewhere in the diaspora. Why is that important? Because why was that demand being made? And I will say it was a demand, not a request. Because as Jetty Baba Jake Carruthers, one of my dear friends and colleagues and instructors, talked about in his book, Intellectual Warfare, that we are in a battle for ideas, a battle for ideas. And for at least as long as we've been in this country, the idea is, as my father once said jokingly, a NIGGA ain't worth a copper, right? That is a penny. And that is because we don't have a worldview, according to him. It wasn't even a consideration. And so when Jake Carruthers talks about a battle for the mind, when Dr. Bobby E. Wright, the great clinical psychologist, talked about the psychopathic racial personality, what was he doing? And Amos Wilson does this in Blueprint for Black Power as well, that they were challenging the fundamental assumptions with which we exist in, that we exist in a world of what I call everyday invisible violence. And one of the highest forms of that violence is epistemology. That is the notion of knowledge and the generation of knowledge and the legitimization of that same knowledge. Prior to our demand for Black studies, we weren't generating new knowledge. We weren't generating knowledge which Cheikh Anta Diop talked about as the cultural unity of Black Africa, not just on the continent, but wherever Africans were. And that's because the whole question of knowledge and knowing was a Western or European project, and we were immersed in that project. And what Diop and Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark and many, many others, going back to Martin Delaney, Maria Stewart, in the 19th century, they all were saying that we have a right to assert our, quote, 2 cents, that we have a right to define ourselves for ourselves. We have a right to imagine a world for ourselves. But that right wasn't afforded to us by the dominant culture, because the dominant culture wanted us to be assimilated, to lose all aspects of ourselves. So that's why in this month, so-called Black History Month, originally Negro History Week, Dr. Carter G. Woodson said that we've been miseducated. And part of that, a large part of that miseducation has to do with knowledge of ourselves, our history, our past, and also for us to imagine a different future. Why is that important? Because there's something in neuroscience known as the brain default network. And the brain default network stabilizes our brain's activity such that when we're accustomed to thinking a certain way, feeling a certain way, acting a certain way, then that becomes the norm. It becomes habituated. And so, not to say that we become accustomed to misery, sadness, sorrow, and suffering, our regular trademark, as Fela Kuti sang about, but that it just becomes a habit and we don't think about it. And so, and until we saw, and it happens, if folks go to church, right, on Sunday or Wednesday, they feel exuberant, exalted while they're in church, right? Because being in that environment, they have shifted out of their comfort zone, that brain default network, into a different network. But what happens once they leave church, then they go back to that state. And so within us, that's why language is so important, as Professor friend Yosef Ben Levi talks about. You know, he's someone that I hope Taki you would have on your show at some point, because he gives a breakdown on language and the importance of language and why even learning Medu Neter is important. Learning an African language like that is important. And so what happens, the language that we use becomes part of our being. And that's really important to know, because when we use self-deprecating language, even if we dismiss what those terms mean, our brains don't know the difference. And so we still are in the epistemology, the system of knowledge of the oppressor, of the dominant force. And so we have to be very careful about the terms we use. For example, you know, there's a lot of folks talking about the whole notion of white supremacy, right? White supremacy as an ideology, or extreme white supremacists as those who were engaged in the insurrection on January the 6th. But here's the problem with that. And I want the viewers to think about this for a minute. As we know, Dr. Martin Luther King famously said, we got to get our language straight. He said, because if you look up black in the dictionary, you have all these negative connotations. And if you look up white in the dictionary, you have all these angelic or wonderful connotations. And so the problem is when you say white supremacy, Runoko, right, you invoke subconsciously the corollary to that. And what is that? It's black inferiority. Even though, Taki, you may deny that you're inferior to anyone, right? You may believe that you're made in the likeness and the image of God, whatever name you want to use for that. But our brains don't care, because in our semantic space, it's a subconscious space that's been measured. There's been experiments that's measured the associations of different words that are used. And so when you say white supremacy, you're invoking the corollary to that, which is black inferiority. And so we never should use that term. A more correct term, as Dr. Bobby Wright would say, would be the psychopathic racial personality, or white sociopathy, to say that this behavior is anti-human, that it goes against the best interest and long-term survival of human beings, because that's what it is. And, you know, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual has a number of categories which that may fall under, like extreme narcissistic personality disorder, but they haven't gotten to the point of saying white sociopathy. But that was something my dearly beloved friend and collaborator on many projects, Dr. Patricia Ann Newton, was pushing the American Psychiatric Association and others to adopt some notion that not racism should be categorized as a mental dysfunction, but white sociopathy, to put white in front of sociopathy, that this is referring to an extreme psychopathic personality. And so in our quest to move forward, we have to understand that we are engaged in moral warfare, in epistemological warfare, in the notion of ontology, Greek for beingness, that Frantz Fanon has talked about. We're in a zone of no being because we don't count in someone else's system as human beings. In fact, there was a Supreme Court decision in March of 1857, popularly known as the Dred Scott decision, where Chief Justice Cheney said that these Negroes are beings of an inferior order, not even 3/5 human. They were beings of an inferior order, and that is written into government statutes. And unfortunately, when the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, ordered the bust of Judge Cheney, Chief Justice Cheney, taken down last year, no one said nothing about how can that statement be amended that said that African people, African Americans, are beings of an inferior order. And so that's something that I think some folks need to pursue to continue this battle for the recovery of our own knowledge and the elevation of that knowledge, that we have the capacity, and many of us have been doing that, of generating new knowledge. That was the whole focus of Black studies, because there was a relational ontology, that we were always looking at the deep relationships between things, beyond what Kimberly Ellis talked about in her intersectionality theory of race and class back in 1989. This is before she even thought about that we were looking at the interrelationships between things. And that's something that musician, composer, ethnomusicologist, my music teacher, Phil Coran, said that in the African way of knowledge, you can't know anything unless you study everything. And so it's a pleasure being with Tony and Runoko, because they exemplify that whole notion of studying everything to make sense of everything. And so we have to continue on. And so I'll stop there.
Thank you for that. So, one of the things we wanted to do was provide context of just how the mind works before we got into some of the other parts in terms of how can we reverse the process of white homogeny. We're going to use that word, we're going to use the term correctly, and I call it white superiority, we call it white homogeny. And how can we reverse that? So some of the things we need to do, we know we need to get into who we are as a people. So Professor Browder, how can or does an African-centered concept of the creator help us from our mental enslavement?
Well, if we deal with understanding the essence of the reality of human existence, Africans were the first human beings on the planet. Africans, according to the latest data that I'm aware of, it changes almost every year. Africans, as Homo sapiens sapiens, have been on this planet for at least 300,000 years. Geneticists have been able to demonstrate that the African genes that mutated and produced non-melanated Africans, i.e. Europeans, those genes are only 7,000 to 8,000 years old. So that Africans have been living on this planet at least 292,000 years. We were the first people to think, to read, to write, to reason. We were the first human beings to develop a God concept, and that's all God is, or creator is, or supreme being is, a concept. So we were the first people. We have more knowledge and more experience understanding and interpreting the unseen force, which some call God, Allah, Jehovah, whatever term. So we should first look to ourselves before we continue to engage in the mythologies of other people. So our key, our success, our future lies in us engaging in acts of Sankofa and going back and retrieving the best of the ancestral knowledge that has been left for us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So, Dr. Rashidi, history, such an important element. essentially the same question: how does knowing who we are as a people, understanding our history, free us from that mental enslavement?
Oh, it's essential. And again, greetings to the HAPI family. My brother Hunter and my brother Karak and sister Felicia, and of course, brother Taki. It's an honor to be on your show all the time. I feel grateful. It's essential.
Thank you. We'd love to have you.
Well, we're going to keep doing it then. You know, Malcolm X said it. I don't know if anybody was more succinct when he said, of all our studies, it is history that is most qualified to reward our research. I mean, hey, there's a young sister that I like very much, and I know Brother Karak is a fondness for. Her name is Anthony Browder. She likes to say, the more you love your history, the more you love yourself. And there's a brother in Cleveland named Qua David Whitaker. I love all these quotes. And that is, what you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. And what you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you have been told. I mean, what else can I add to that hasn't already been said? And it's obvious that the people who emphasize their history and culture all the time run the world. And the people who don't are at the bottom and are the most exploited and the most oppressed. So my question would be, because, I think of myself nowadays as an interviewer. When I'm in a conversation, I end up asking more questions than anybody else. So the question would be, how do we inject this same feeling that we have into the masses of our people? How do you inject this sense of urgency, this desire to want to know into the masses of our people? And I think, to me, that is the key. We're all doing wonderful work, but sometimes I feel like we're really not connecting with the masses of the people. Sometimes you hear sisters and brothers say, well, everybody ain't going to be with us. Some of us ain't going. Some of us going to get lost. What does that mean? We talk about Black unity. What does that mean? What is Black power? What is empower? All of those questions run through my mind. Right. Brother Hunter made some very profound comments. I, for one, am tired of being a victim. This may sound cold, and you may decide not to have me back again, but I don't want to be a victim anymore. We don't have to be victims. We're not helpless. We can take control of our own destiny every day. Sister and brother will tell me we were lied to. They stole our history. Okay, now what are we going to do? And the other issue, and I'll be quiet with this, what role do we play in our own destruction? I mean, white hegemony can't exist unless we feed it, unless we give it our children to be miseducated, unless we give it our dollars. So what role do we play in the perpetuation of global white domination? So anyway, that's how I would start off, my brother.
Okay, for that. And one of the things we thought about doing the show was, so we say you three brothers, esteemed elders, Felicia and I, we look up to you tremendously. And we were thinking, like, what better example to show Black unity on this level than any other level, So I'm thankful for you brothers coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And family, we have to support these three elders. I understand, Dr. Rashidi, you have a webinar coming up soon.
Yeah, Brother Taki, let me just say one more thing. And I tell Karak this all the time, and I want to emphasize it again and again and again. It's very important that the community see us working together.
Yes.
And not at each other's throats, not cutting each other down, not rivals, not competitors, but we're all in this together. And if you want glory and fame, you can take that too. But the key is for the community, especially those of us talking about Ma'at and Hotep and the negative confessions, to be able to work and actually like each other and appreciate, love each other. Yes. And build each other up, and to be able to see the bigger picture. That is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Let me jump in, if you don't mind, to Runoko's point, and we've had conversations about this in the past. Brothers need to be able to demonstrate their love and affection and appreciation and admiration for each other. And I can truly say that the relationship between Runoko, Hunter, and myself has exemplified that reality. I love Runoko like a brother. I love Runoko. I love Hunter like a brother. And I've known these two brothers for over 30 years. You know, we've been in this struggle together. We've had some victories together. We've cried together, and we're in this to win it. So I would like to think that our presence here tonight is a demonstration of the love that everyone watching has within them. And it's simply a matter of committing themselves to spreading that love to every Black life that matters to them.
Wow. You know, I couldn't have said it. You know, that you really took the words out of my mouth. Let's go to the next question now, because I was about to say some stuff better united than divided, but you two brothers really just, you know, knocked it out the park. Okay. Professor Adams, you quite often speak about framing and you know, the importance of understanding that. Can you please elaborate on what that is a little bit, please?
Yes. You know, we look at a picture frame, right? And so a picture frame has an image, a photo, or whatever in the center of it, surrounded by a frame. So in other words, the frame contains something within it and excludes everything outside of it. And so we have to understand the whole notion of framing. How is a story framed? How is the news framed? I'll give you an example. Really, it's several public relations firms, international public relations firms, that send out news bulletins to AP, Reuters, all the news agencies, and with how a story is going to be the basics of the story. So then it's up to the particular news outlet, whether it's Fox or ABC, MSNBC, CBS, or whatever, to frame that story according to their demographics, because they want to make sure that they hold on to their audience. The thing about frames is that we all use frames. You know, we hear the word stereotype. A stereotype is a type of frame. But we think it's just something that's minor, but really frames are shorthand mechanisms that our brains use to classify different things. And so you can believe things based on how they're presented, how your perception receives them. And so we have to be very careful about the ways in which we are taken advantage of by information. You know, there's a whole notion of the gaslight effect. That's a frame where someone will tell you what you see, what you're seeing, what you're believing is false. It's not true. And if you fall for it, you will become a victim to that. For example, it said in the 1776 project that some Black conservatives and the former president created last year, that the sister writer Nicole Hannah-Jones from the New York Times in 2019 had the 1619 project, which sought to, quote, reframe U.S. history by starting with an acknowledgement of what has been said, the settler colonist's greatest sin. It really wasn't a sin, and that was, quote, slavery, because that typically is left out of textbooks, particularly the ones that use Texas as a standard, because those textbooks go to high schools and elementary schools all over the country. Well, of course, there's a denial of that. And so her project, because of some small inaccuracies, was roundly and soundly attacked. How even the Marxists, which some of our people believe are our friends, but Professor Harold Cruz in 1967, The Christ of Negro Intellectual, told us that those white Marxists, like many white liberals, are not our friends. They are fake allies. And here, if they really believed in telling the story of the founding of this country, of the contributions that African Americans made, of the genocide that happened to indigenous people, well, then they should be supporting that. But instead, their frame was it was a falsification of history, agreeing with the frame that the right-wing people had, which were backed by dark money, by the way. We don't know where they got their money from, so forth. So framing is very important, but I'll stop there. You have any other comments, anyone?
So when we think of framing in terms of just how the mind works, how does the framing or the correct framing free us from white hegemony?
Okay, one thing, and I had the distinct pleasure and privilege of being with Tony at his invitation to last December in Kemet, right? Particularly, we saw the winter solstice, and that is something profound, Runoko. Your next trip, you got to take folks to see the winter solstice. And so the thing about framing is that for 398 or 99,000 years, all African cultures, these all world cultures, were self-referential. What do I mean by that? That they were self-validating. They weren't validated by someone outside of themselves. But we have been in a situation where we seek validation from other people who don't look like us, and that we want to love them so much that we say, ain't we sick, boss, right? To meaning that we seek value from them. And so we have been propagandized over the past 300, 400, 500 years, and now it's really been ramped up to devalue ourselves. And so part of the recovery effort has to be not seeking validation outside of ourselves, because this is a new phenomenon. It never happened in human history until recently. If you go to China, right, you will see that the students in elementary school and high school start the day off, one people, one land, one country. They're not referencing themselves to Europe, right? They are referencing themselves to themselves. But we reference ourselves because of this huge intellectual war, epistemology and values to other people that we seek to be validated by them in whatever the case may be. We applaud ourselves to be the first this, first that. That's okay, but when you say that, you are seeking validation from someone else. We sing praises to people who become Rhodes Scholars, but they don't know who Cecil Rhodes was. They don't have a clue. Why would you want to have an award named after him attached to you? And so part of the problem is, the struggle is, we have to validate ourselves. And we were doing that in the 60s and in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But because of the relentless onslaught of propaganda and social media, some of it deliberate. Sometimes, there was agents using Facebook to create street teams to create conflict between us and other people who look like us, because they were making money off of it. There's a financial incentive to keep people divided. And so we have to understand what we're up against. So it's a little different than 10 years ago that, some of us do love ourselves, but it's hard to do that continuously when you're constantly under assault.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for that. Family, before we move on any further, I just want to make a couple of quick announcements. These three elders here all have particular, extraordinary projects. We want to make sure that we support these endeavors. Professor Browder, I want to start with you and talk about the AC Restoration Project quickly and briefly, where you're at, and tell people how they can donate to this process.
Sure. We are approaching our 13th year with the Ace of Restoration Project. Hunter was there with us at the end of our season. He saw that we now have access to 8 tombs that we are restoring, 8 tombs. People can go to our website, ikg-info.com, see information of what we've done, and to also make a contribution to continue to support our work. ikg-info.com.
And Felicia's going to put down on the screen. Say that again, please, one more time.
Sure. ikg-info.com for the Ace of Restoration Project and other information.
Dr. Rashidi, understand you have a webinar coming up.
Yeah, I have 2 actually. Karak, 8 tombs. 8.
Yeah, brother.
Hey. And for those who don't know, I met Hunter Adams, I think, or I became aware of his work around 1981 in a book called Blacks in Science. He had done some remarkable work on the Dogon and this so-called serious mystery. So we get to talk more about that. You know, I have a lot of things going on, but I do have a webinar tomorrow on the 12th with Sister Baina Bello. We're going to talk about Haiti, and particularly we're going to talk about women in the Haitian Revolution. You know, I love Black women. I'm very, very proud to say that I'm a Black man a strong Black man who loves Black women. And every time we get an opportunity to lift them up, we should take advantage of it. So I was happy to hear Hunter talk about Dr. Newton, among others. And I know that Karak loves Dr. Welsing and Dr. Newton as well. So tomorrow I'm going to I have a conversation with Baina Bello, a Haitian activist and scholar, bad sister. And then at the end of the month, I have a regular webinar called the Global African Presence Webinar. And this time we're going to return to the Nile Valley, the Happy Valley, sorry about that. And we're going to look at the expulsion of the Hyksos, which is Africa's first national liberation struggle. And then the glorious 18th dynasty of Hatshepsut and the Tutmosids and Amenhoteps and Akhenaten and even King Tut. And then we'll look at the 19th dynasty, the dynasty dominated by Ramses the Great. So if you want information on any of those, and I hope you do, I hope to see you, go to my website, which is drrunoko.com, drrunoko.com, or just type in Runoko on Eventbrite, and both of those will come up. And you can always email me at runoko@hotmail.com, and I have plenty of information to share with you.
Now, one of the things we want to make a quick announcement, and that is, it's like we have some feedback here. For the first 10 people that email us, we will be giving away tickets for Dr. Rashidi's webinar. So it's very important that you email us at info-happy. We'll put it up on the screen in a minute. And first 10 people that email us, we will be giving away complimentary tickets to the next webinar with Dr. Rashidi. Professor Adams, what about you? How's everything going? You have anything coming up soon?
At some point, we don't have a date yet, but we're going to be, myself, Professor James Small, and Dr. Wade Nobles will be doing part 2 of our African Sacred Science webinar that we did, was that in September, right? We had scheduled part 2, but unfortunately, we lost Dr. Patricia Newton to the ancestors. And so we're working, trying to start that over again later this month or in March. We don't have a date yet, but I will keep you informed when that does happen.
Okay. We just want to make sure we give heartbeat props here, and we want to emphasize that to the community. And people go out and support these brothers, support HAPI. You see Professor Browder's wearing the Nubia shirt. Thank you for wearing that. You know,
thank you for giving it to me. Appreciate it.
You know, you can just stand up a little bit, let them see your shirt.
Here's my shirt.
That's how
nice.
So I guess the next time you have the 3 of us on, you're gonna have to send Hunter and Runoko their shirts. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm expecting one. You know, I mean, you should have never said that, man, because I'm expecting. And do you know who those are? Those are the Napatan kings, starting with Taharka, going down for 3 or 4 generations. And that's in a museum in Kerma in Sudan. I took 2 groups to Sudan, and I'm happy to say that my brother Karak was on that tour. And do you know why we call him Karak? Does everybody know that? Why I call him that?
Tell the story.
Well, because he is the incarnation of Karakamoon. Now I love Hunter Adams. I can never say enough good things about him. And I feel the same way about Tony Browder, but we like to call him Karak. One of the reasons I admire him so much is because he's not just complaining about what white folks did to us, but he's taken his time and fortune to excavate a series of tombs from the latter part of the, what do we call it, 25th, 26th dynasty, sometimes called the late period. I think, I could be wrong, but I think that it is the first time in history that an African has actually financed that kind of work. That's remarkable.
Amazing.
So we have greatness in our midst. And it seems to me that, again, I just can't say enough good things about the HAPI movement and what you all are doing. I mean, we're making it, we're writing history, but we're also making history. And the people that we have on the screen today are history makers. Let me just say one last thing, and I'm going to be quiet for a while at least. You know, if not for this pandemic, I never would have heard of Zoom. I never would have heard of StreamYard and WebEx and Google Meet. So what we have now is another media, another vehicle to put this information out there. And it's important that we embrace that. And for you all who are listening, HAPI Talks, send them some money. They've assembled this team, send them some money. Allow them to do their work without worrying about financial stresses. Same thing for the Asa Restoration Project, which is named after Asa Hilliard. And my brother Hunter Adams needs your support. All right, I'm done.
On that note, we want to one last quick announcement, and thank you for that. Its support is so important. If you don't want to, we put the Cash App information up for those who want to Cash App, Super Chat. There's so many different ways people can support these various different projects. Speaking of projects and support, we have a second installment of Happy on a Happy with Anthony Browder coming out next Thursday. Want to make that announcement. All those who saw the first installment, they enjoyed it. The second installment's coming next Thursday. Look forward to that. Professor Browder, graphic designer, and that's a big thing for you. And your design skills and craft, your design skills. What was it about it that? How did you put your design skills in context in terms of writing your books? I know you spoke about that a couple of times. I just really want to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Sure. Well, let me tell you a secret, man. I'm an artist. I've been drawing all of my life. When I was living in Chicago, I wanted to be an architect because I was just taken by the architecture of Chicago. Chicago is the home of the first skyscraper. But I've always had issues with math. So when I transferred from University of Illinois to Howard, I changed my major from architecture to graphic design and advertising. So I'm an artist at heart. And I happen to have fallen in love with history as a result of hearing Ivan Van Sertima here in DC in February of 1977. And he opened my eyes to a whole new world. He was the first person to tell me that the Egyptians were Black. And then I began reading. I discovered John Henry Clark, John Jackson, Dr. Ben. In 1981, I met Hunter Adams and Asa Hilliard at a conference in Chicago. And so I started reading everything I could. And I didn't begin writing. Writing was happened by happenstance. I had gone on the Kathy Hughes show in 1986, and I talked about this idea of the creation of the Negro. And Francis Murphy, the owner and publisher of the Washington Afro-American newspaper, asked me if I would write an article that turned into a 2-year series called From the Browder File. And she gave me specific directions on how to write for my column, And so I followed her directions. And as I began to write more, what I actually wound up doing was I write like an artist. You know, I see the images, I see the concepts in my head, and I create the words to frame what I see. So one of the best examples of that is my book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is actually 3 books in one. It's a book about history, it's a book of pictures, and it's a book of short, easy to digest pieces of information. The idea being, my background is in graphic design and advertising. So how do you sell books and information to people who've been socialized to disdain reading? I remember, I never forget when I told my mother I was going to be writing articles for the Washington Afro-American newspaper, and she said, "Who reads the Afro?" Well, fast forward 3 years later, the proceeds from my book, from the Browder file, bought the house that my mother moved into. So she, you know, she learned the value of that. But my point is, I write like an artist, and I view history through the eyes of an artist. And what I do is write in such a way that people can see what I'm writing about. So that's been my gift. That's been my talent, and it's allowed me to, you know, connect with these 2 beautiful brothers that you have on your program.
I know you said in that first interview we did on the Nile, it was made in such a way, or done in such a way, to make our people have a greater appreciation for Nile Valley civilization and culture. Yeah. And I thought that was such a profound statement, because that goes into the discussion, this discussion here, particularly with Professor Adams is saying about framing. You framed it in a context, and you made it in a way that was just like very strategic. And the strategy of it is for me, which is amazing. And I just wanted to, you know, really kind of look at this strategy and understand this, you know, your thought processes, and you shared that already in terms of just how that was the essential part.
Well, look, if I can, 2 minutes to just share the essence of it. I was a graphic designer. I've been self-employed for going on 42 years. And my biggest challenge as a freelance graphic designer was coming up with the ideas to satisfy my clients so that I could get paid. And one particular evening, I was stumped. I couldn't come up with an idea to meet, to share with the client I was going to meet in 3 days. And I started thinking about my grandfather, who was one of the most brilliant, creative men I ever knew. Wasn't well educated, but he could build anything. And I was the firstborn grandchild, so I was his assistant whenever he was building something. And I remember my grandfather never sketched anything out. He always had the finished product in his mind. And one evening, as I'm trying to come up with an idea for this product after design for a client, I remember thinking about my grandfather and watching him look around the house and then come up with an idea, get hammer and nail, saw, and make a bookcase, make anything. And I remember saying to myself, if I could see what my grandfather saw, because I knew he could always see the end product. And again, through meditation and visualization, I saw myself as my grandfather seeing the finished product. And then I took that idea, that energy, and saw myself meeting my clients in 3 days and saw the design that they liked. And then I created that design and created that scenario. And that's when I realized, as an artist, we all have the ability to tap into the source of everything. We all have that ability. And that if we can, or as we see and manifest those things that we see, they become our reality. That's who we are. And that's what Kemet demonstrates. The people who were able to master their minds and produce in the physical world those things that they conceived in their minds. We've done that better and longer than anybody else on the planet. So that, to me, is the most essential key to our freedom, freeing our minds so that we can become the geniuses that we carry around with us in our DNA.
Thank you. Dr. Rashidi, your lectures and your travels, you have an expansive reservoir or amount of images that is often used to help us free our minds. When did you realize just the importance of imagery was such an essential aspect of freeing us from our mental enslavement?
From the beginning. I've been doing this work for 48 years. I'm 66 years of age. And I remember as a freshman at the university, I registered late, and the only classes that were available were the Pan-African Studies classes. You could register in the middle of the semester and there'd still be space, they'd let you in. So I had an assignment for one of my instructors, and she said, well, what do you think is the strategy? What should we do? And I said, well, you know, what we should do is we should just have a lot of photographs, and they should show Black people from Africans from the very beginning till today. She says, pictures? I said, yeah. And I never really, look back on that. Right now I have, I would say, 500,000 original photographs from the museums, but also the tombs and the temples. And what I'm trying to do now is integrate the museum pictures with the photographs that come from on site, original photographs. And I can honestly say, as arrogant as this may sound, that with few resources, but with a lot of hard work and determination, I've compiled what I have is no doubt the most comprehensive African-centered photo archives ever. Yeah.
Thank you. Professor Browder, let's go back to you for a second. Knowing yourself. How does knowing yourself help us tap into our genetic memory and DNA?
Oh, that's to me?
That's for you. Yes, sir.
Well, the essence of what I've come to understand is that we carry within us, and I'm sure Hunter can elaborate on this, we carry within us the genetic memory of all of our ancestors. And accessing those memories is what we refer to today as genius. So we're all geniuses. And the more you know yourself, the more familiar you become with the geniuses that you carry in your genes. So if I can play Taki for just a second and toss the ball to Hunter and ask Hunter to elaborate on one of Sister Segmet's most significant findings, and that is the red nucleus and what that really portends for African people.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that ball, but I got it. So anyway, Dr. Patricia Newton and I, we last year were developing a program which now will continue under the auspices of the Dr. Patricia and Newton Institute for the Advanced Study of Trauma and Healing. There will be a website up later this month. Formally, there will be a name change of the old organization, World Circle Foundation, and I will share that information with the HAPI family. But one of the things that I learned when I first took a neuroscience course at Chicago Medical School, when I was working towards becoming a medical doctor, was the professor said two things that stuck with me. One was that we are related to sponges. And that is that even though we don't tend to think of sponges as living creatures, but they are or were. And so there's a continuity of life, of consciousness going back millions, in fact, billions of years. We're related to all aspects of life. And that was one of the things why in Kemet and across the continent, things were called nature. That is, they were divine, that they called each other nature, that we have that dimension, that spirituality within us. And so when we talk about habits, and I mentioned earlier about the brain default network, there's 800 cells in the midbrain, our limbic system, on either side. And this is something that Dr. Richard King and I talked about a lot, Runoko. I remember when we came to Compton College. You brought us to Compton College back in the day.
Good old Compton, yes.
Right, and Malachi Andrews was talking about sprinters and the importance of sprinters because they had that melanin within them and so forth. But these cells that Dr. Richard King and I and Dr. Newton talked about, the red nucleus, when you learn how to ride a bicycle, for example, as a child, you remember, how many times do you remember falling off that bicycle, skinning your knees and elbows? But you got back on, and eventually it became automatic. So voluntary behavior, in that case, riding the bicycle, became involuntary because the red nucleus, and why is it red? Because if you look at it under the microscope, it is red because there's so much blood flowing through it. The same way with something known as a substantia nigra, right? The substantia nigra, Latin, that means black substance. And that is that there are a number of nuclei within our brains that are black, that because they contain melanin, neuromelanin. And one of the problems with Parkinson's disease and other movement disorders is that the substantia nigra stops producing neuromelanin, and it leads to all sorts of motor pathologies. And so Dr. Patricia Newton and I and Dr. King, we talked about the profound effect that has, is that our red nucleus not only habituates motor behavior, but it also habituates thoughts and feelings. And so we end up feeling the same way, reacting the same way because it's habit. You know, men and women fight one another because it's habit. You know, there's a new movie out, which I don't recommend. It's called Malcolm and Marie. It's a terrible movie. Well, it's not so much terrible, but all you see is a man, Denzel Washington's son, and another sister fighting. And it does nothing to uplift us. And so it ends up, we're being trapped in behavior patterns that we see and we imitate. And so there's a system, hold on, Runoko, called the mirror neuron system. You wonder why. You wonder why people do the things that they do is because they see other people doing it, right? Because we end up imitating what we see other people do. It's unconscious. And the red nucleus system, they work together, keeps those patterns, those negative patterns of behavior repeating themselves. And so we have to find ways to break out of that by doing new things. I hope that helped you out.
Now, before he can get in, I also want to take Taki's job for just a moment. And I want to put two questions out there. You know, I miss Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben. And and I think about them all the time. And I think about questions I would like to ask them. And I realize now with some reluctance, we're the elders now. It's our turn to try to answer those questions. So I have two questions I want to pose, if it's okay. One, do you think that African empowerment or return to power is inevitable? That's one question. And the other question is, how long will it take? When will we be empowered again? That's it.
Who's going to answer that?
Well, that's an easy question. Yes, it's inevitable. And when you consider the fact that it took at least 500 years to get us in the condition that we're in, to program the red nucleus, to internalize all the negativity, which is part of that psychological, emotional, historical, and cultural feedback loop, the self-destructive feedback loop that we've been on for 500 years, we've got to do exactly what Hunter said and write new programs. So it will probably take us at least 100 years to write new programs and to make those programs a part of our psyche. So I figure, conservatively speaking, 200 to 300 years, we should be well on our way.
Wow, 200 to 300 years is a long time, brother.
Runoko, you know better than that. 200 or 300 years is
well,
nothing.
I'm being provocative. I'm taking Taki's job.
Okay, thank you. Yes, but 200 or 300 years is nothing. Considering the fact that we've been here 300,000 years, 200 years is day before yesterday, right? Day before tomorrow. And maybe this kind of takes us in a whole nother level of conversation. if we deal with the reality that there is no death, that we come back, then what we're doing is setting the stage for our eventual returns, right? So we do the work now, as Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben and others did. Then when they come back, when we come back 100 years from now, 200 years from now, imagine us all coming back 200 years from now with all the knowledge and even more power than we have. Imagine what we'll be doing then, right? That's what I see. That's my reality. And freedom will be a byproduct of the things that we'll be creating then while we're in our sleep, you know?
Let me jump in here for a second.
Brother Hunter, what do you think?
Few people know that last year there were several major celestial events that took place. You had the conjunction seen from the Earth of Jupiter and Saturn, something that doesn't occur very often. I think the next time that happens maybe will be in another 600 years. And then at the same time, there was a solar eclipse that took place in Southern Africa, going all the way to Chile. The third thing that happened was the winter solstice, right? And these three things together was something that some people were calling the Great Restart, not reset. You know, as many of the billionaires are saying, they want to reset things back to where they were so they can control the future. And so you see some people talking about building colonies on Mars, right? Building these fabulous cities. That's all to inspire people to continue to move away from what Kalinde Iye, who was Wesley Snipes' bodyguard, who's a martial arts master, who studied all sorts of ethnogens or power plants, as he called them, that we are pushing towards a spiritual singularity, not a mechanical singularity. And that's what happened last year, that it began the restart of, as Killmonger said, to restart the world in the Black Panther. But we have to understand that it's up to us to do that now. That in order to do that, we have to know and appreciate ourselves. We have to call for what I call radical self-love, radical self-referential, self-referring to ourselves, and not allowing ourselves to be worshiping, seeking respect and validation from people who do not look like us. You know, there was an article a couple of weeks ago that a brother wrote. He said he's lost faith in white humanity. Right? I can't remember. His name was Stanley Fritz. So if you search for Stanley Fritz, I think he's on Medium. He had this article that he lost faith in white humanity because he realized what 20 brothers told General Sherman and General Stanton in 1865. There was 400,000 African Americans freed. They were called contraband. And so General Sherman went to 20 of them in Savannah, Georgia, and asked those 20 brothers, all of them were religious people, what do you want? What do you want? This is special. It ended up being Special Field Order 15. And they said that we would like to have some land. We don't want the federal government to give us land. We will pay for the land. And if you have a mule, we would take that too. And so he said, well, okay, then you want to be around white people. And they said, no, because we don't trust them. We don't believe that they will work to our interests. So we just want to be left alone. And so here in 2021, this brother is saying the same thing, is that he would prefer to be left alone. because he can't trust them, either people who he thought were his friends. He found out after November the 4th that they were part of that 74 million people who voted for the opposition. And so that's one of the things that we have to do, is to return to loving and validating ourselves, and not looking for validation from someone else.
Can I have my job back?
Yeah, man. Go ahead. I'm gonna let you back in, man. We wanted to give you a nice little break.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So, loving ourselves, radical self-love, showing appreciation for those who are with us, look like us. I just want to definitely give a shout out to everyone in the audience. Thank you for being a part of this discussion. Thank you for sharing the broadcast. Thank you for supporting HAPI. Thank you for supporting all the three elders on this platform. We have to continually do this. You've been hearing from the scholars here, and they've been so eloquently speaking to that. And our blueprint for Black Power is self-love. So we have to get back into that. When we talk about this discussion here in terms of who we support, we need to talk about who we necessarily shouldn't support and why we do these things. So Professor Adams, I actually want to come back to you again. Does the science that you study explain how economic enslavement is connected to our rabid consumerism?
Oh, absolutely, because we're not circulating money in our communities. At one time we did. There was more than just Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That was one of the things that happened in 1865. Those 400,000 people established towns from southern South Carolina to northern Florida. Many of those towns were self-governing. And I think that scared the people in Washington. And that was probably one reason why Lincoln was assassinated, because they were worried that, wow, these Black people got towns in the South and in Mississippi and Alabama, that they may become independent and self-sufficient and circulate money among themselves. One of the beauties about the HAPI film, when you look at the Kemetic economy, right, as a whole, they were circulating resources amongst themselves. Yes, they did trade with other countries, but for the most part, their resources, their products, the things that they made, were circulating among themselves. And so that's something that we need to do. We don't have to go downtown Chicago or DC or to the suburbs. We can support our own businesses. And if they fall flat or fall short, then we can demand that they do better. If they don't do better, then we can start businesses of our own. We have to do something. We have to generate income so people can be self-sufficient. Runoko and Tony shouldn't have to be hustling out here. We have people with wealth who can certainly support the work that they do, but either they don't know about their work or their financial advisors shield them from their work. But some individuals, like Samuel L. Jackson, for example, decided to produce this film, this series, which I suggest people see, called Enslaved, because he wants to support the work of telling our story right, getting our story right. And so we have to support ourselves, start businesses. That's something that Brother Watkins and our friend, I'm blanking on his name, from Detroit.
Claude Anderson.
Claude Anderson talked about with Powernomics, is that if you're not producing anything, if you don't have any money, well, then you will be trapped in this system. You'll be satisfied with despair and despondency and woe is me. So there's things that we can do. We can be creative. This time that we have right now, this coronavirus situation, that people have this time where they can think. If they do think, some people don't think, But we have this time. We should be thinking of ways to generate funds, because most of the jobs that people had are not coming back. The businesses are not going to reopen. The restaurants are not going to open. Even the ones that were financially stable, they're closing, closed doors. But we can open new doors within our communities if we tap into this creativity that we have within us.
Thank you. Dr. Rashidi, you have tremendous expansive knowledge in terms of your experiences of travel. Have you ever come in contact with melanated people who do not see themselves as being Black?
I don't know if I say I've run across Black folk or melanated people who don't see themselves as Black. I run across people who don't necessarily embrace African identity.
Okay.
And so, I've been doing this work for a long time, and I can honestly tell you that I don't have a precise definition for African. And I don't have a precise definition even for Black people. It's kind of problematic. If we can all say that we trace our lineage to Africa, then you could make the argument that everybody is an African. Here's a story. We talked about the great John Henry Clark. Dr. Clark is one of my favorite ancestors. I have a lot, but I love Dr. Clark. On my first trip, I've always had an interest in indigenous Australians. And I was invited there in 1996 to come along with Kwame Ture to address a historic international gathering of indigenous people in Australia. And I couldn't go. I signed a contract to lecture on a cruise ship in Kemet. And that wasn't a bad thing, but my heart was really in Australia. I had been in Kemet before, but I'd never been in Australia. So the sisters and brothers said, don't worry about it. We like you enough so that we're going to have another conference in 1998, and we'll invite you as a keynote speaker there. In the meantime, send somebody in your place. So I sent a pal of mine, a brother named James Brunson. James went, did the presentation after I got back from Kemet. I called him up. I said, James, how'd it go? He said, it didn't go well at all. I said, why not? He says, these sisters and brothers don't see themselves as African. So they're not anti-African, but they think that they are truly indigenous, that humanity began in Australia. Well, that bothered me. I couldn't sleep. So I called my guru. I called Dr. Clark. I said, Dr. Clark, a friend of mine went to Australia. They said they ain't African. What do you think? He says, Runoko, don't worry about it. He said, I can take you down 125th Street in Harlem and show you the blackest person in New York City who will say, I'm not African. He said, wait until Africa gets strong. And then even you will be surprised at who embraces Africa. And so in many ways, identity, I think, is a question of power politics. People want to go with the winner. And bottom line is, I have been taught that Africa is the worst place it ever was, and I'd rather be anything other than an African. And so we embrace all kinds of what I call pseudo-identities. One of the big things right now is, maybe I shouldn't go there, but I've already started, the Aboriginal movement, that we're really not African, that we've always been here. African people, the children of Africa, are the first people to settle in the Americas. But that's a very different thing than saying the transatlantic slave trade didn't happen and we are the direct descendants of those original Africans.
Right.
So we have a real issue about identity. Say one more thing. What we are doing, I think, is very, very new. We're talking about an international African identity. Maybe the only good thing that came out of the Ma'afa, the transatlantic slave trade, in my mind, is that since we don't know, a lot of us, now we're beginning to find out through DNA analysis, which part of Africa we come from, we claim the whole continent.
Absolutely.
From Cape Town to Cairo and from Senegal to Somalia. That's a good thing because we're talking about an international African identity, a sense of solidarity among our people that has never existed before. That's how I would respond to that question.
Thank you. And the second question, the African population in South America is tremendous. We know in Brazil, Colombia, and other places like that. We spoke earlier about the, correct me, the pronunciation, Palenque people in Colombia. And I just wanted to, am I saying it correctly?
Yeah.
There's a town in Colombia called Palenque de Basilio. and the local people just call it Palenque. And it's near Cartagena. I visited the year before last. And it is considered, although I don't think it's accurate, but it's considered, we're going to say, okay, the first free town of Africans in the Americas. The key thing for me is if we're going to talk about enslavement, and we must, none of us would say it's not important. We just don't want to start there. But if we're going to talk about enslavement, let's talk about resistance to enslavement. I don't want to just see us as victims. We did more than pick cotton. We resisted, and that resistance took different forms. And one of those forms was in the establishment of maroon communities. And these are communities, even nations or states, if you will, that went into the bush and established Black republics in the Western Hemisphere, in some cases even before Haiti. And Palenque in Colombia is one of those places.
Thank you. Thank you. Family, please like and share it. Professor Browder, we're fragmented all over the world in terms of our consciousness and our people. You speak of the Aset principle. How can we use that understanding of Aset to bring us back together?
Well, Aset was the wife of Asar who collected the scattered parts of his body, put him back together, wrapped his body in bandages, created the first sahu, or what Arabs call a mummy, made it possible for the spirit of her deceased husband to impregnate her so that she can give birth to his son, who was really the reincarnation of him, so that he can continue the rulership of Kemet. So the Aset principle is a concept of us putting together the scattered pieces, the fragmented pieces of African people. And that is happening. I would say, and I've got a good team of people here to correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that Africans in the Americas are best suited to lead this movement of the restoration of the African consciousness, because Africans in America, specifically Africans within 100 miles of where I'm living right now in Washington, D.C., are the best educated, wealthiest African people on the planet. We need to begin to do more with our wealth, do more with our education to benefit our people. And it's that potential which makes us to focus of so much aggression on the part of our former oppressors. They know who we are. They know what we have the capacity to do. So they have to create obstacles, impediments to prevent us from coming together and doing exactly what we're doing tonight. This is our destiny. We are here. We are here in America to access all of the knowledge that is available to Africans here that is not available anywhere else in the world. We're here to be able to access all of the technology that's accessible to us here in America that's not accessible anywhere else in the world. We can travel all over the world because of the power that we have accumulated here. So we are here for a purpose. And I believe, no, I don't believe, because belief is something you accept without proof. I know that in our previous lives, we made an agreement to come back at this particular point in time in history so that we could be participants in the efforts to reclaim African glory. That is happening now in real time. And when it happens, you know, my Egypt on the Potomac field trip is something that I just stumbled upon back in 1986. But part of my understanding now is realizing that we created Egypt right here to remind us of who we are. So all we need to do now is activate that Aset principle, tap into the ancestral consciousness that is in us, and we will find that we already have all of the tools we need to remake America in our own image. And once we're free here in America, we can free Africans all over the world. I think that's why we're here. And that's what our ultimate goal will be.
I like that, freeing Africans all over the world, which brings me into my next question. Dr. Rashidi, you know, the first video we did got tremendous support. It's well over 100,000 views right now. And one of the things that I noticed, which is quite interesting about it, those who, I guess, did not like it, the pushback we got came from a certain segment of the Latino community, almost in the sense that they felt we were trying to steal their culture and their history. Can you elaborate on this? Can you provide some context to that, why they maybe think this?
I think a lot of those people are actually trolls. That's one of the problems with social media. Everybody who is on social media ain't who they say they are.
Absolutely.
And I think that people, Brother Hunter talked about it at the beginning when he was talking about COINTELPRO.
Mm-hmm.
Our enemies are not stupid. Enemies of African progress are not dumb. And they see the importance and the possibilities of social media. And so they put obstacles in the way of that. Now, whenever, and it never fails, whenever I talk about Africans in Mexico, all is well. But as long as I'm talking about entertainers and athletes and rappers, and I'm talking about the cuisine, everybody loves you. Runoko Rashidi, you're the greatest person that ever lived. We appreciate you. But when I said that African people played a role in classical civilization, including the Olmec, they want to do a George Floyd on me. The same people who loved me a minute ago are angry. It's amazing to me that in February 2021, we're still having discussions about whether the ancient Egyptians were black, whether the Moors were black, whether there was I don't even say Olmec civilization was African. A lot of my brothers and sisters get mad at me about that. I say there was an African hierarchy in the Olmec, and they turned it out. But those folk, brother, they want to do, I feel like I need Kalindi IE to follow me around. Because as long as, I'll put it this way, sum it up. As long as you confine yourself to slavery, you're all right. You might even get some money. You can get a museum. You can make a movie. But when you talk about black people as the mothers and fathers of humanity, as the founders of civilization, then all hell is going to break loose. What does that mean? That African people have to begin, or not begin, but to continue to tell our own story. And if other folk get mad, that's too bad. We're going to tell our story loud and clear. We're not going to whisper. We're not going to stutter. We're not going to stammer. And we're not going to lose sleep if it makes you uncomfortable. You know the expression, until the lion has an historian, the hunter will always be a hero. You got 4 of them right here looking right at you, and we're not going to back up.
Yeah, that Olmec is the one that seems to cause, for them, like, just the whole discussion about the Olmecs is something I find quite interesting, and just seeing people where their minds are. And thank you.
And you know what that means? We should go back and do another program on the Olmec.
Yes,
round 2.
Because that African presence in early America is something that they love it, but some people were just constantly going back and forth with it. I just really wanted to
imagine this now. If they give me grief in 2020 and 2021, imagine what Ivan Van Sertima went through. Imagine what John Henry Clark and Dr. Ben and Jay Rogers and Hansberry and George G.M. James and Drusilla Dungy Housen. Imagine what they went through. And so we are standing on their shoulders. They are the ones who started this. This is what we're doing is not new. It's a continuation. And I don't intend, and I know I speak for Hunter and Karak, we're not going to drop the ball. We're going to make our best effort. We're going to make mistakes, but we are not going to back up. We're going to do this until there's not a breath in our body. And we're going to do it to the best of our ability. And I'm proud to be a soldier in the Army of African Liberation. And I ain't going to stop.
Right. And one of the reasons, General Runoko, one of the reasons we can take that position is because we don't work for nobody. We're independent. We don't have a boss or a supervisor standing over us, telling us what we can and cannot do. So that's one of the benefits of being free, being independent.
Professor Adams, wow. I kind of lost my place for a second. Language, you spoke about language earlier, and I just wanted to make sure we capture this so people really understand the importance of using words to either further enslave us or to free our minds. If you could please close out with that.
Yes, and I should say this, if people want to get a hold of me, they can reach me on Twitter at Hunter H. Adams 3 at Twitter. So you can reach out to me there. Yes, it's so important because we have to remember that up until the last 30,000 years or so, our primary communication was oral. And, you know, we know that Western researchers and Egyptologists and anthropologists, they had a disdain for oral language because they said it wasn't accurate. Well, that was their experience when they were investigating us during the colonial times, right? And so we always have to question the notion of what our elders told those colonists. And one of the biggest things that have written about, and it'll be out later on, is what the Dogon priests, astronomer priests, and others told Marcel Grioli and Germany Dieterlin. They in turn crafted a story themselves. They made stuff up. They showed a map of the sky and pointed out Sirius B, and they told them that they misinterpreted what was said. But that's another story that's coming up. But the point that I want to emphasize is that the words we call ourselves, the words we refer to ourselves, impact us all the way down to our genome, because our genes hear the words that we use to speak to each other as. We may not think that that's the case, but we're setting ourselves up for all types of ailments and afflictions by the language that we use and the beliefs that are attached to that language. So now there's this push for African Americans to get the corona vaccine. And I've been asked to be part of panel discussions with physician friends of mine in the Chicago area to talk about getting the vaccines. And so one of the things I told them, what good will a vaccine do if you're still putting ham hocks in your greens, right? If you're still giving your children flaming hots. People forgot that red dye number 2, which is in flaming hots, is a known, demonstrated carcinogen, that we have to take control over the language of our health, that we can't continue to eat the same things prepared the same way that are giving us these comorbidities. So whether you take the vaccine or not, whether you believe that they're working or not, whether you believe the story, the fear that they're trumping up, and that's no pun, on that this boogeyman, the coronavirus, is going to come and get you if you don't take this gene therapy, which they're calling vaccines. And so we have to be wary of the disinformation. That's part of what is happening today. That's part of what happened to some members of the QAnon alternative reality game. They learned that it was just a game and they got punked, played, and pimped. And so now they have regrets and are using that as a defense to get off the felony charge that they were charged with for invading the Capitol. So clearly we have to stop using self-deprecating terms to communicate. I know some folks say, well, that's what they talk about in the barbershops and the beauty shops, the B's, the H's, and the N's, and so forth like that. Well, we have to stop that type of talk and use language that expresses our love for ourselves, our love for our culture. So any other points you want to add to that, Runoko or Tony? Karak?
You said it all, man. I'm cool.
Yeah, I've already taken enough of Taki's job for tonight. I dare not interject anymore. I fear.
Well, you know, I fear you. So, Karak, you know, brother Tony Browder, I'm a huge fan of all your brother's work. I just want the people to understand, and I know you've said this a million times, But for those people who are just coming in now into the conversation about Karak, and tie that into this fantastic work that you're doing, and tell people how they can support that.
Yeah, let me veggie back on a response that Runoko gave us a little while ago when I said that we now have 8 tombs. We started our season in September with 4 tombs, and we ended with 8 tombs. So what finally hit me as we were finding new tombs, and in some of these tombs, as we were excavating, we're finding artifacts from Karakamen's tomb. We're finding other artifacts from another local tomb. So this was a hiding place for the thieves, the Arab thieves, who had robbed all of these tombs of their precious human cargo. So what finally dawned on me, and we also the one tomb where we found the pyramidion, you know, our biggest breakthrough of the year was the discovery of a pyramidion, because we had suspected that there were pyramids, Kushite pyramids over these Kushite tombs, but they had all been destroyed. Well, we found the pyramidion, and so it finally hit me that with each tomb that we uncover, we are uncovering the sacred space of an ancestor. And when we can say their name, we're giving power to them, and we're making it possible for them to live again. And as they live again, they then will give their power to those who are helping restore their lives. So if you can just imagine, you know, the 8 tombs that we have uncovered, the ancestors that we have now given life to, and all of the ancestors associated with them coming forth, thanking us, protecting us, and making sure that this work continues. This is what is happening. Because given the fact I'm not an archaeologist, I'm not an Egyptologist, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but I've been doing it for almost 13 years. So there has to be another hand, there has to be another force working behind the scenes to make sure that I'm doing what Dr. Welsing said. I'm fulfilling my cosmic assignment. So even though others cannot be a part of what I'm doing physically, they can contribute financially to this work. We're set up as a nonprofit, a 501c3, and they can write their contribution off on their taxes. So what that means then, by you contributing to this process, you are also pleasing these ancestors, and these blessings will be extended to you and your family. And that's how I see the one of the ways in which we can overcome the difficulties that we find ourselves in. We can't beat our oppressor with physical weapons. We can't beat them with technology. We're going to have to beat them on the only battlefield where we've always beat them, that is on the spiritual realm, on the ancestral realm, because we've got more ancestors on our side. More ancestors have our back than anyone else. And all we need to do is align ourselves to them so that they can work through us to bring us the victory that we have been fighting for so long. So make a contribution to the Asa Restoration Project, make a contribution to HAPI Films, buy all of Runoko's books, buy Hunter's new book when it comes out, We Were Never Slaves. Continue to support us in any way you can. And by supporting us, you're supporting your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren. That's it. That's the only reality that counts.
Right. So, Karak, I just want you to just elaborate on Karak Amen for a minute, and why Dr. Rashidi's been, you've gotten that name. Who's Karak Amen, and how has he impacted you? How has he inspired you?
Well, and I do have to acknowledge Charles Finch was the one who kind of put this on me. He started saying back in 2012, 2013, you're Karak, you're Karak. You're the reincarnation of Karak. And I dismissed that because I thought it sounded very egotistical. But I have come over the last couple of years to really gravitate toward that reality, gravitate toward that possibility. And that is, by working in these tombs for the last 12 and a half years, I've come to understand what they knew. They knew that there wasn't any death. They knew that they came back. And so everything within the temple tomb of Karak reinforces that reality. So I know that. And as I began to consider, why am I doing this work? Why have I invested so much of my money and my time and in the time of so many other people near and dear to me into this work? And, you know, it dawned on me that I've been here before. I know that I've been here before. I know that I've been in that space before. I know that my love for architecture, my love for design, my love for storytelling and crafting stories, all of that is in these tombs that we've been excavating. So I see my life in this incarnation as a continuation of my life, of my lives in previous incarnations. And so I'm carrying all of this with me. And by acknowledging that reality, I then get the strength to continue doing this. And I know that there's more to come. I'll close with this. I've spoken with both Runoko and Hunter about this, this tomb that I happened to stumble upon in 2016 that had the Sankofa symbols painted on the ceiling. This tomb is also the largest tomb ever built in Egypt. It's larger than any tomb in the Valley of the Kings or the Queens of the Nobles. I'm convinced that this tomb was a repository of the knowledge of Cush and Kemet, and that the information within this space can only be made accessible to us when there's enough of us in our right minds to become the vessels to receive that information, right? And I'm feeling very strongly that the time for that is right now, as we're watching America descend into a pile of nothingness, as we're watching this country become more fragmented than it was during the Civil War. We don't need to get involved in all of that. I don't watch the hearings, the impeachment hearings. I'm not interested in that. Let our oppressor destroy themselves. I'm looking at how we can use this time to rebuild ourselves. That is what's happening right now. That is where our attention should be. And this is not for everybody, but for those souls who know that they're here for a purpose, for those souls who have come in this life to do, as Dr. Wilson said, fulfill your cosmic assignment. This is our time to do our best work. And in doing our best work, we will change the trajectory of humanity forever. And quiet as it's kept, that's what we have always done. That's what our ancestors have always done. And we've done it better than anybody else. So they live in us. They express themselves in us. So all we need to do is be open and receptive to that. And they will ensure that a new world reality will come into manifestation.
And so I want to add to that, to the HAPI family that's with us this evening. Tony has been very modest. I went there last December. He has 125 people on his payroll. He has some of the best conservators in all of Egypt working with him and his team. He has experts in human bones, experts in animal bones, experts in refiguring what the temples look like. I saw that. And so he needs our support. So please support this project. I was there. I saw the people carrying rubble in rubber buckets from inside the tombs. And I almost slipped and fell a few times down the ramp. It was an adventure every day seeing that, you know, that they can only work during the early morning hours because by noon, the sun is too hot. And so please support this project. You know, he has his daughter, Atlantis, with him. He wants to train people to do this archaeological work, to continue the work, so they can get their qualifications and start digging up these plantations. Because right now, most of the archaeologists that are working on these plantations are Europeans. They're not us. And so he's providing an opportunity for students at various colleges, universities, not just the HBCUs, to come and get involved. So please support this project. It's amazing work. It's amazing seeing the discoveries that they found. When I was there, we found, Tony had found a pyramid that was a chapel and not a tomb. And that's amazing. And they believe that there's others there to be excavated. And so, you know, why does he need this support? He needs support because he's looking to build a visitor center and a museum to highlight all the things that they found. And he would like to do that by 2022, 2023.
2025, Hunter, that's the new time frame, 2025.
2025, okay. So if you know people who got deep pockets, big checks, big bank accounts, and there are many in this country, please tell them to go to his website and learn about this project. Go to HAPI Films and see the interview, amazing interview that took place on a ferry on the Nile. That was a beautiful thing to see Sister Felicia so relaxed, talking with Tony on the ferry, on the Nile. It was a beautiful thing. I mean, I wasn't on that ferry, but I was on other ferries. And so that's something I just have to, you know, spend these few minutes supporting my friend and brother and colleague for this amazing work that he's doing and has been doing for the past soon will be 13 years. And so maybe I'll get a chance to go back next year. So thank you.
So I just wanted to say thank you for being a part of that collaboration that we, the experience we had bringing that Happy on the Happy with Anthony Browder piece together. And like I said earlier, volume 2, part 2 is coming out next Thursday. We'll be posting that video next Thursday, so everyone be on the lookout for that extraordinary interview with Peace. I want to give a shout out to Omawali Africa, who was a part of that. Absolutely, Sister Felicia, Anthony Browder, Alanis Browder, all those who were definitely a part of that endeavor and that project. Please, like elders have said, support this endeavor. It's extremely important. You get a chance to really see some of the stuff in the video. Part 1 is on, it's all over, it's on YouTube. Go check it out. Part 2, you'll see some more extraordinary images from just the dig sites and, you know, the Kemetic and Kushite tombs that are there. We also want to make another announcement, and for Happy, you know, let people know that we're not just asking for you people to donate to this tremendous project. We're also doing that as well. And we're looking to match people tonight, match your donations and equal them in terms of the Asa Restoration Project. So please, the information's there. Make use of it. Make your contributions. Extremely important. Professor Adams, a lot of people in the chat are talking about the release date of your book. Can you provide any information on that?
Yes, the book is called We Were Never Slaves. It's been a 12-year project, and I do look for it to be released by the summer of this year, ancestors willing. So I'll keep people posted on that, and it's going to blow everything up that we think we know about the word slave and everything associated with that word and slavery, even the word enslave. That's also problematic. And so this book will blow all that up. And so it'll be another contribution to help us free our minds. Okay. And are you taking any pre-sales now or anything of that nature? So people can register to get the copy? Not right now. Probably in the spring, I'll be doing that. Okay. We'd love to have you back in the spring to talk about the book and help you, with the campaign to release it. I could say that Dr. Gloria Latimer Peace, she has a Facebook page and a blog, and I did a show with her, and you can find it where I talk about the book. So I think it's 3HO Dr. Gloria Latimer Peace. You can find her on Facebook and also on YouTube. And you can search. Sorry, I don't have the exact web address, but if anyone's interested, I did an hour talk on the themes of this book on her show.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Rashidi, we made the announcement earlier. I hope people took advantage of it. HAPI was giving away 10 complimentary tickets to your webinar tomorrow. We want to make sure people are taking advantage of that. We want to also speak about the webinars again and how people can go register for them.
Well, I have 2 webinars. One is tomorrow night with Dr. Baina Bello. We're going to talk about Haiti and why Haiti is important to us. What is the significance of the Haitian Revolution? We're going to talk about Vodou. We're going to ask the question of whether Haiti has been made an example of. Haiti, to me, is like Africa in the Americas. So that's tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then at the end of the month, I do a regular webinar, the last Friday night and the last Saturday morning of every month. And this one will be a return to the Nile Valley. Again, we're going to look at all original photographs, maybe 500 photos from the museums. A lot of my research is in the museums. I think that there are enough artifacts in these museums to reconstruct in large measure the entire history of the African world, but also integrated with some of the images from the tombs and temples and monuments. So we're going to look at the expulsion of the Hyksos, the first national liberation struggle in Africa. We did it once, we can do it again. And then we'll go to Dynasty 18, which has been called the greatest royal family to ever mount a throne. We know the names of the people: Amos Nefertari, Hatshepsut, the Tutmosids, the Amenhoteps, Queen Ty, Nefertiti, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun. And then we'll go to the 19th dynasty, mostly looking at the times of Ramses the Great. But, and I wanted to say this in connection to Brother Karak and the Eze Restoration Project, there's only one person that I know of in history that has done something similar to what Karak is doing. And it ain't just Karak, he has a team. He's the figurehead of that. And I don't mean that in a disparaging manner, but he's the face of that movement. But there are other people involved too. And I know he would be the first one to say that. But historically, there is a person named Kemwasit. Kemwasit is the son of Ramses the Great. He was a magician, but more than anything, he restored, we're talking 3,300 years ago. He is the first person and the only person that I know of to restore the ancient monuments. Now think about that for a minute. If this brother comes to us in 1300 BC, that the Giza pyramids, the big pyramids, are already more than 1,000 years old. Think about that. The longevity of African civilization. And my brother Karak, Tony Browder, is doing something similar to that. And I don't mind taking a back seat to that. You know, I don't feel jealous or competitive. What he is doing is historic. And I'm really proud of this brother. I'm proud of Hunter. And I also want to just remind folk that it ain't just the brothers. Our dear sister Felicia is in the background doing the technical work. She's beautiful. She's brilliant. She's hardworking. And so that's my speech. If y'all want to get information about my webinars, just go to Eventbrite and type in the name Runoko, or go to my website, drrunoko.com, or email me, runoko@hotmail.com, and I'd be delighted to see you. What you all are doing is wonderful. I'm really, really proud to be a part of it. We are not enemies, we are families, and we all we got. We may not be happy with each other all the time. We may have bumps in the road, but we're all we have. And we are the ones we've been waiting for. And Francis Wilson used to say, what will your statement in life be? So I say, let us make a powerful statement. Let us go forth and do something that not only will the ancestors be proud of, but future generations will say, well done.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we we put out the announcement for the free complimentary tickets, and we have an overwhelming response. Over 50 people. We're saying 10. Over 50 people responded. So we're looking at the first 10. But I like to see that, because hopefully that translates into attendees as well. So those who don't get complimentary tickets, please, don't be dismayed by that.
So Taki, let me do this. Let me do this. I will pay for the next 10, all right, to support my brother Runoko. All right. So next 10 on me.
Okay.
That's
all right. So
I believe in his work. Support his work.
This is how it works, supporting each other. And like we said, we're definitely making our donation to the Asa Restoration Project. We want to support Hunter Adams and all that he's doing, and we ask for the same thing. We're not asking for money, but it takes money to make this work. With that, please go sign up for the newsletter on our webpage. Be a part of the HAPI movement. I'm actually 3 brothers just hang out in the backstage, so I close this out real quickly. And just want to say, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. The HAPI movement is on the move, as you can see. This was an extraordinary discussion. Beyond my wildest imagination, I didn't really think I know it was going to be powerful, but it definitely blew my mind. Share and like this video, please. A lot of people were in the building tonight. Definitely get this video out. Get the shares up, please. Like it. It's very important to break the algorithms. Another important aspect, like we said earlier, the HAPI film is screening this Saturday, 7 p.m. Following the screening of the film is the panel discussion by the key cast members. If you have not seen HAPI, please take this opportunity to do so. If you like HAPI Talks, you're going to love the HAPI film. HAPI film is the foundation for this. We started this program on the podcast to support the film. And, this has a whole nother spirit of itself. HAPI Talks, and we're proud to be a part of this. This is not something we designed. The ancestors designed this for us, and we're just going along in our mission to do this. This is a whole separate entity, but people have to see the film. Extremely important. The newsletter, hapifilm.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Those who don't have it, those who are not signed up, the newsletter it's free. It's a monthly newsletter. It's published each month. Fantastic articles on who we are and how we can foster the blueprint for Black power. Extremely important. Please be a part of that. Please be a part of the overall HAPI movement. People have donated tonight. We appreciate that from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you very much. For those who just want to support in other ways, we have the various different shirts. You can see like I have on now, like the brother Anthony Browder had on. I'm definitely get a t-shirt, a poster, DVD, digital copy. Support HAPI. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who's been a part of this. Shout out to the HAPI film team, Brother C, Felicia, Rock, all those who've been a part of this, King Simon, John Henry Staples, Michelle Jewell. I know I'm missing names. I apologize for that. And please don't take offense to it, but definitely want to acknowledge people for being a part of this. We love you. We love your support. Good night. Peace.
I don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?